How you doing, everybody? This is Inside the Burrow. We are joined today by defensive coordinator Coach Roc Bellantoni. Coach, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me. It's really good to be with you guys.
Thank you, really appreciate it. Also joined, as always, by Zach Weinberger. Zach, how you doing today, bud?
Doing great. It's great that we have Coach Rock here, and
Great.
again, this is gonna be a really huge episode for Inside the Borough, so I'm excited.
And
I
then,
appreciate what you guys do for our fans. I really do. It's great to have outreach and really appreciate you doing that. We're still trying to grow this program. It's still a young program. It's legal age to drink now, but we're still trying to create fans and it was a teenager the last time I was here, so I really do appreciate you guys doing this for them.
well, thank you, Coach. That really means a lot. It really means a lot that you're sharing your time with us today, especially since we're so close to the season. And then the final member of our panel joining us for the first time this season, Kevin Fielder. Kevin, how you doing, bud?
I'm doing well. Season is starting up, and it doesn't hit you that week zero is like 3 days away until you look at the calendar and you realize week zero is 3 days away.
Yeah, it was a long summer that's finally coming to an end, and very fortunate here to be joined by Coach Rock. Coach, this is your second stint here with the Owls. What are some things that you've noticed differently, both about the school and the overall football program from your previous time here?
Yeah, well, we didn't go to the Final Four the last time I was here. That's one thing that's different. I guess I read somewhere that it was we have the biggest freshman class in history after that's happened, so that's great. The school's still growing; it explodes. There's not a whole lot of cosmetic differences on campus, but I haven't been much on campus, if I'm being honest. Still, just a beautiful place to be, but there's more people. I can tell that just from driving into work and stuff like that. As far as athletically, still strong athletics. Obviously, with basketball success, things are growing, and then when you walk into this beautiful football building that was just a pipe dream, 9 years ago when I got here. It's a little bit like a different job. It's a little bit I don't know. It's a little, I don't know, eerie maybe. I don't know if that's the right word, but it seems you're working at the same place, but it seems like a different job because the building is better, the food we're giving the guys is better, the quality of players is upgraded in an overall sense. I feel like I'm walking into a different job this time around.
And if, from a defensive standpoint, can you just talk a little bit how fall camp has went for you and went for the players? Just kind of, what's been some of your favorite moments so far?
Oh, favorite moments. Wow. It's all a blur, really.
Yeah.
I guess fall camp has been good. We're still trying to lay a foundation around here. The expectation level, the standard. Coach Herman tells us we're keepers of the standard, and we have a standard, and we have to hold them to that on the field, off the field, in the meeting room, the classroom. So we're still trying to lay that foundation. The guys have bought into everything we've said. They're working their ass off. They're trying to do things the right way, but they're occasionally they slip back to old habits, and we have to snap them out of that. So we're still growing one day at a time, and thankfully we still have about a week and a half to go because we're not ready to play a game yet. But my favorite, I don't know. Some of the times you spend away from the field would be my favorite times. That's when you're really learning about the players, when you hear their stories of where they're from, what they've been through. So even some of the coaches, what they've been through and their stories. Those to me, those are team bonding moments that you can't create on the field, and those would probably be my favorite time so far.
On the field in particular, what would you say is sort of the strength of this defense through fall camp? What has stood out as, when you look at this defense in particular, what's the strength of the unit and where they stand from here?
The strength that you cut in a little bit there, in and out, Kevin. But I think I heard the crust of what you were saying. I think the strength of our defense is probably, it's probably our D line right now. We have the most done in terms of the three levels. I think those guys are playing really well. We got a number of guys that we can rotate in there and play and give us some quality snaps. I think those guys have played really good football throughout camp. They're quick, they're strong, they're playing with much better technique than they did in the spring. I think our linebackers have upgraded, both the guys that we brought in here and the guys that were here before. They've gotten a lot better. And then our secondary, we've got a lot of talent back there. It's just finding the right fit, the right guys on the field, and making sure we have the right guys on the field. Our depth isn't as great back there as it is up front right now. But I'm cautiously optimistic. Our guys, they play hard. They try to play hard for each other. They're grading a lot better in terms of doing their assignment than they did in the spring, and I think they have a better feel for what we want done schematically and culturally in terms of running to the football and getting 11 hats to the ball every play and looking after their brother and loving each other and fighting together. I think we're on the right track.
Well, speaking of the defensive line, we are in a time with college football that it seems that there's a rotating door across all of the roster. But on the defensive line, you have Evan Anderson, who's been one of the biggest consistencies on the team. What does it mean to have a guy like Evan there leading the line for your defense?
Yeah, I mean, it's baseball. It's strong down the middle. You're going to be pretty good. And same on defense. If you have strong D linemen are going to really, hold not only hold their gap, but maybe create a new line of scrimmage in the center of the defense. Linebackers can fit and flow off of them pretty well. And Evans, he's a really strong player, man. He's like a bull, and he's trimmed down a little bit from the spring. I think he's playing more physical now. I think he's healthy now. He's a really disruptive player. He occupies 2 and 3 blockers every play, or if they're not double teaming him, he's in the backfield and creating a lot of havoc back there. So it's nice to have him in the center of our defense for sure.
And I guess just talking about the linebackers, like you alluded to, I remember talking to Herman back in the spring, and he was saying that he's been kind of waiting for guys to show up in that department, really the inside linebackers. So what have you seen from that position group, maybe from guys like Eddie Williams or Justice Cross? What have you seen from them?
Yeah, so Eddie was a guy who didn't practice this spring because he was coming off an injury, and he's back and he's full speed. And I remember Eddie in high school. I tried to recruit him to Buffalo, and you hear such good things about him when you get here, but couldn't see it in the spring. And he's really shown all those things that everybody said about him. He's quick, he's fast, he's really smart, knows the defense inside and out. He's pretty much the leader of that group. So very, 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 very happy with how he's been playing. Jared Gerald's and Jackson Ambush, who's a newcomer. Gerald's was bounced around between linebacker and tight end. It was a good special teams player last year. Has had a really good camp. He had a really good spring. He's had a great camp. Jackson came in from Albany, and he hadn't played in the spring, so he was transferring and wasn't going through spring ball. So he's shaking the rust off the beginning of spring, and he looks really good right now. As Tisdale transferred in from Auburn, Des is another guy who only played a few practices in the spring, shaking off some rust. He's had a really good camp. And then the guys that we also had in the spring that took a ton of reps, Jabari Hill and Jalen Wester, have gotten a lot better. They've really improved from the spring till now. It's just we have a bunch of other guys that can play too. So the competition is bringing out the best in that whole group, making each other better every day. So we got a lot of options in that group.
How important how important is having good depth at linebacker like for you guys? Knowing that
Yeah.
where you guys are now, you guys feel like you can probably go a little bit deeper than you were in years past.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely be a lot deeper. After watching the film last year, I think we have a much stronger unit than we did last year, and I think that's important. Number one, because of the competition. It's whoever the 2 best guys are. They may not be the 2 best guys the next week. Every day is a tryout, and we'll put the best 2 out there at a time. We'll rotate in guys when we can to keep legs fresh and keep the competition going until it really declares that someone is so much better than someone else that he gets a majority of the reps. I hope it stays that way all year, where we can play a bunch of guys and they can find a role. It also helps on special teams because you got fresh legs running down the field on covering kicks or blocking for returners. So, having a good deep linebacking crew really helps our entire football team.
Coach, we talked about some of the top players on this defense, but throughout the summer, who have been some of the hardest working guys out there on the field?
Ooh, wow, hardest workers. That's a great question. Armani Adams he comes to mind. He's a guy that I think we really can lean on. He's a great example center. Jacob Merrifield is another guy. Smoke is a really hard-working corner, leader of that group. A-Day also works really hard. He's gotten a lot better since the spring. Oh boy, yeah, at linebacker, Jared Gerald's works his tail off. Not that the other guys don't, but I'm trying to, pick out you said the top guys. Marlon Bradley, those guys, they really work. We got a lot of guys that are pushing themselves, and they grade in the weight room with Joey. Joey does a great job down in the weight room. He grades them every day, tells us where the effort is and who's giving it, and there's not a lot of negative reports coming on guys because they can't. We have a standard and they're trying to live up to it these days.
You alluded to Jalen Wester, who was a really exciting player for us last season, and especially towards that second half. I remember Coach Herman mentioning earlier in the fall that he's kind of a guy that had a really playful attitude going in, and maybe grown a little bit up, maybe more mature, and he's had one hell of a camp. What have you seen from him from your eyes?
Yeah, Jalen he's kind of turning the corner a little bit. Playful attitude is one way to put it in the spring. Um, he's really grown up. I'll say that he's really grown up. He's handling his business on and off the field a lot better than he was in the spring. He's trying to do things more schematically sound than he did last year. I think last year he would be the first to admit he didn't exactly fit where he was supposed to fit at certain times. He's doing a lot better this camp. Even in the spring, he's doing a lot better now. He's an exciting football player. He's got a bright future. He's going to be a really good player here. How fast that happens, I don't know. We're bouncing him around. He's playing both Mike and Will. But again, there's a bunch of other guys in there that can play too. So he's working really hard because he wants to play. He wants to be on the field.
I want to ask about Gerald's in particular because he's a guy who's built his career so far at FAU on special teams. What kind of growth have you seen from him on defense in particular, and playing as linebacker as opposed to just playing special teams?
Yeah, well, let's be honest. Okay, if I'm being honest, when you come in and you hear that one of your linebackers is a guy that played tight end a year ago, you're like, okay, well, let's see what he can do. Not knowing all the background that he did play linebacker before, and then we get out in the spring and you're like, oh wow, this guy played tight end last year. Why was he over there? He looks like he's been playing linebacker his whole life. So no, he wasn't perfect, but he played really well in the spring, and then in the summer, I'm telling you, the guy's just a leader, man. He just grinds. And then this camp, he's playing as good or better than he did in the spring. I think he's a guy that's getting better every time he touches the field. So really happy with it. I'd say he's a pleasant surprise because, again, when you first think about a guy that played tight end a year ago, you wouldn't think he's going to be a really good linebacker that could start for you. So really happy with him.
Coach, we talked about this a little bit with Coach Ed on the offensive side of the ball. There's a fine line when it comes to team camaraderie, but maintaining that level of competition within the team. What has the competitiveness been like within position groups and then with fellow position groups on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, I think we have a bunch of grown-ups on our staff, guys that have been through the ringer and around the block and want to work together and win football games. You want to compete in practice, you want to do well in practice, but it's not about winning in practice. It's about preparing the team for the games, right? So I feel like, Ed and Rosie worked well together with the O-line, D-line. Hey, what do you need to see? What do you want to see? This week in some of our run fit periods, we're giving them what they need, and they're giving us what we need. I'll tell you, and that starts at the top with Charlie Fry. Charlie Fry is a first-class individual, man. I love that guy. I love working with him. He's real easy to work with. We sit down, we talk about what we need to see, what we want to do. And really it's all across the board at all three levels on offense and defense. I think our coaching staff works great together. All we want to do is win. That's all we care about, the common goal, not about boosting somebody's ego or anything like that.
And just kind of talking about maybe from a defensive perspective, when you face the offense that FAU currently has, they just announced a starter in Casey Thompson, a really deep wide receiver group, running backs. Does that kind of get the best out of the defense when you're facing an offense that can really just fly everywhere?
Yeah, you say iron sharpens iron, right? That's an old common phrase, and I feel like I've been in a few places the past 6-7 years, and I feel like our offensive line is really good. I feel like we have a really good O-line. We have some really good receivers. I think we got 3 really good running backs. We got a couple quarterbacks that can really play. So when you go against an offense that's that talented and it's run by a guy like Charlie and the other coaches who have done a lot of successful things in their career, man, if you can go toe-to-toe with those guys and do a good job against them, it builds a little confidence in your unit, and gives you a little sense of security that we can compete against some of the best teams in our conference. I think, not having played against them, but I think our offense is pretty good. So when we go toe to toe with them, I feel pretty good about where we're at. We just got to keep taking strides forward.
This defense, I think, is an interesting mix of guys who are experienced but still have eligibility left, and maybe that's the reality of college football with the COVID eligibility rules. But with some of the younger guys on the roster, guys who have only been in college for a year, even less than that, how do you sort of ease them into playing or getting into a position where they can play a little bit more consistently if called upon during the season?
Sure, yeah. I think first I'll tell you this: when we first got here, you look at the board, you see a bunch of guys who are juniors, seniors, and you think, wow, we have a lot of experience. And then you kind of look and take a deeper dive into it, and Brandon Harris and Gibb telling us that we have an older team, but a really inexperienced team. Guys that haven't, Marlon Bradley hasn't played a ton. Even Day hasn't played a ton, I guess, and on that list goes. So, and then, so when you're a young guy and you come into a situation where there's some older guys who haven't played a ton, those guys are coming here to play. And they want, when they take the field, they want to take someone's job every day. And that's competition is the biggest motivator we have. So we tell those guys, come in here and try to take someone's job. Don't come in here to redshirt. Don't come in here to to be a backup or anything like that. So Fabian Scott and Chris Tooley, those guys in the secondary, they're trying to get into the two deep and get on the bus and play special teams. And I'm telling you, they're right on the cusp of doing that. So that's exciting to see those young guys come on. And a guy like Jalen and Jabari Hill, those guys want to get in the mix. They want to play defense, special teams, and so like I said, every day is a tryout. It's a long season. We put out there the first snap of the season probably isn't going to be the group that we put out the last snap of the championship game, because I think guys are going to keep getting better all year, and they're going to keep working, and we're going to have to mix and match.
Well, Coach, we really appreciate your time here today. I also really love how you answered the end of that question there, saying in the championship game, because you have those aspirations that you want to maintain. So we really, really do appreciate your time here today. As we wrap things up, if you just have one message to get out to the FAU fans, the FAU faithful, what would it be?
Just come out and support us. Come out and watch us. Let's keep building on our traditions here. Let's keep having the owl walk, from the owl walk to the final whistle of the game, getting the students in the game. I've seen things on Twitter over the years. I know they've been having a lot of fun in the stands, and let's keep building our foundation here and building this program and taking the next step to a higher level in a new conference, and maybe taking the next step as a program. And our fans can be a big part of that. We really need them. We need them on third down, making a lot of noise to annoy the offense. After playing in some of those stadiums I was in last year, I can tell you it definitely affects the opponent. And when you can't even hear yourself think, that's what we want. And we want guys here stomping on the stands and creating a real home atmosphere. So come out and support us. And hopefully I know we'll give you everything we have in terms of coaching and playing and laying it all on the field in return for you showing up. So I hope they'll come out, they'll give us the support we want and need, really, to take this program to another level and keep building this thing.
Well, Coach, we'll for sure be out there rooting for you guys. We're really excited to see this season finally kick on. Thank you very much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Yes, sir. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you, Coach.
Thank you, Coach.
And again, we're very thankful for Coach Roc for joining in with us today. We're just going to hit a few key points and have some other things to talk about for the rest of the podcast. So, Zach, from what we just heard with Coach Roc, what was the biggest thing you took away from it?
Well, obviously you mentioned it towards the end of the episode or the interview, just talk about how the aspirations are a championship game. I feel like going into the first year into the new conference, first year under new head coach, people might kind of give leeway to that first season, but they're not really thinking that. They're thinking this is a championship or bust season. We got the quarterback, one more year of eligibility, and it seems that everybody's very excited going into the season. Still work to be done. That's what every coach has been saying. They really haven't been saying if they're close or not. They're just saying there's work to be done, and they're confident they can get it done. The one thing that I really took away from that is Jalen Wester when I asked that question, because you heard it from Herman, now you hear it from Coach Roc. We saw him being a playful attitude. He's having fun with a lot of the guys, which to me is fine. But again, he's way more composed, way more grown up. Just to kind of quote up what those two coaches have said. So I'm interested to see how the performance is from the bottom half of from last season going into this season, because he's going to be a very exciting player, and I think that for FAU fans this is a guy to watch. So, but no, the defense is going to be very interesting to watch coming into the season.
And Kevin, what was the main things that you thought after being able to talk to Coach Roc?
Yeah, I agree with Zach in the sense that the aspirations are there, and they should be. Frankly, they should be because this team still has the talent of a team that can compete for the American, much like it did the last 2 years competing. With the argument to compete for Conference USA. I think the most interesting thing was the linebacker position as a whole, and particularly I think Jalen Wester playing both Mike and Will during training camp or during fall camp because most guys don't cross train in terms of Mike and Will. They usually just do one or the other because of how many responsibilities it takes. So it was interesting to hear that they're sort of cross training him, and I do want to see how often he plays both positions when we get to games that matter and games that count because I don't know if he'll be playing as much Mike and Will during games, but it is an interesting sort of development as we get to the start of the regular season.
Yeah, my biggest takeaway, besides like Zach just hit on, just there at the end, that little slight comment he gave out about that last snap in the championship game. I really like that little feistiness and that competitiveness to him. But something that we noticed also with our interview with Coach Ed Warner, and something we've heard from Tom Herman, and just the overall general vibe on the team is it seems to be a lot of cohesiveness, and everybody is on the same page, working together as a unit, and that's something that's very difficult to accomplish with the first year of a program, with so many new coaches coming in, with some coaches that were previously with the school coming back. Like we just saw with Coach Roc was previously with the school back in 2014. He's back. Ed Warner was here with the previous regime. So many different mixing of pieces, and they're all coming together. And before a single snap of balls played in the regular season, you hear so much of them being on the same side. Like Coach Ed or Coach Roc talking about working with Charlie Fry on the offensive side of the ball and the relationship they have there. And when we asked Coach Ed about the competitiveness and the tough nature, got a very similar answer from Coach Roc. So I love what we're seeing, how cohesive this team is before week one even comes to this team. And I really believe in that as a unit. You're stronger when everybody's fighting for the same thing, fighting together. And that's something that what we've seen from Coach Ed and now Coach Roc, that message is going to be exemplified. And we're going to see that when the time this season comes around. And when the season comes around, we are going to see Casey Thompson leading the line at quarterback for FAU. That was something that was announced earlier this week. Kevin, we kind of expected this all throughout the summer camp, and now the fall camp, and now it's officially confirmed. What are your thoughts of Casey Thompson being named the starter?
Yeah, I mean, it's just not a surprise at this point. You don't go out and recruit a guy like Casey Thompson, and Casey Thompson doesn't commit to FAU under the false pretense of, you're going to be in a competition with another guy. I'm sure the competition was still a real competition. I'm not going to sit here and act like they ran a fake competition for the sake of running a competition, but Casey Thompson is a guy who was playing Power 5 football last year. And he's a guy who played, I guess, solid enough Power 5 football. He wasn't great. He wasn't excellent. No one on that Nebraska team was great or excellent. There's a reason they won like 4 games. But, he's a Power 5 talent, and it's huge for FAU to get a guy like that in. And, we saw that at times with Nkosi Perry. There were moments where you had that brilliance at quarterback. And it was, this is what a Power 5 quarterback does for a Group of 5 team. But now I think you might hopefully be able to get that a little bit more consistently with Casey Thompson. And, I mean, he's just the right guy to lead this team into the American. He's probably the safest option heading into the American.
Exactly. Go ahead.
No, just kind of backing up what he said. Again, just kind of speaking with Casey, obviously Tuesday when kind of Herman officially announced it and just speaking with him, you can tell that he's really excited. High football IQ is the first thing that comes to my mind when he was speaking to me about just kind of how the familiarity with Herman's offense, how he's really excited to work with Charlie Fry, which the connections that he has in terms of the offense working with Tua in Alabama. Steve Sarkisian was a former coordinator for Casey Thompson, and then just other connections that they had. I think this is going to be a recipe for success. And again, missing the spring like Kosi did, but again, the talent, the experience in P5, it's there. And I think that, again, Daniel Richardson deserves some props. Because, again, right when they acquired Thompson in May, you would have thought, okay, well, this is the starting quarterback. But, again, just kind of what Herman said, even in the spring, every guy has to earn it. You can't just, be a starter and then you're a starter again. You got to earn it. That's exactly what happened. And, again, the offense around him it's just set up for success. I don't think they're going to go through really first-year slumps here, maybe in terms of past coaching. But again, you have three guys in the running back room who could rush for 1,000 yards. You have a really deep wide receiver position, experienced offensive line, and even some guys who can maybe spark up in the tight end position, a Zeke Moore, who we spoke to earlier this week. I'm excited. I think this is going to be a really explosive offense if things kind of click on all cylinders against Monmouth. But again, Casey, it was he was just the answer. You know what I'm saying? Especially in his final year of eligibility, it would be a waste if he did not play.
I do just want to say that, like, I think Daniel Richardson was still really good in spring. And so I think that this competition was real competition because Daniel Richardson's a really good quarterback. I think Zach will probably agree with me. I think he was the best quarterback in the spring game. I thought he sort of separated himself from the group throughout spring camp. So I thought I would have felt pretty comfortable going into next season with Daniel Richardson as the quarterback. And so to have him as the backup for Casey Thompson, if anything happens, if Casey Thompson struggles, if you need another quarterback in there, this team is built to be competitive on offense. And, the biggest question is, will that scheme carry over, or will they have some growing pains in terms of scheme? Because, I mean, it is difficult to learn a brand new scheme in one camp cycle, but this team is set up to be successful, and it's going to start on the offensive side with, the running backs, the wide receivers, and I think the offensive line in particular that, while they lose two really good players in Bordner and Nick Weber, like, that's still going to be a really good offensive line.
Yeah, and then the only thing that I wanted to hit on was, like you were talking about with Daniel Richardson, just how he's been throughout this whole process. Like you said, during that spring game, I was very impressed and with the limited time he had with the school, how well he operated the offense, and going into the camp, knowing that he probably is going to end up as the number 2, but still giving it his all, making a legitimate competition that came down to the wire. Even though we all expected Casey to be the guy, and that's what ended up being the case, Daniel Richardson did not let up. He did not let up his competitiveness, and will be able to, I believe, step in if needed, if something were to happen to Casey Thompson, and to run the offense about just as good as Casey Thompson would. Now, there would be some little slight differences, as we know they're going to like to run RPOs with Casey Thompson and his athleticism. Don't get that as much with Daniel Richardson, but they will still be able to run a perfectly fine offense with Daniel Richardson if he does end up having to go in. But Casey Thompson, for this year, for this 1 year that he has of eligibility, is FAU's best chance to win the AAC and push forward, get into that AAC championship game that Coach Roc was alluding to. And I really looking forward to seeing him on the field week 1 as FAU takes on Monmouth. But speaking of AAC, there has been so much going on in the college football realm in terms of teams moving around. FAU just got this promotion up to the AAC. We're seeing what's currently going on with Pac-12 and just all over the nation. Kevin, what do you know about potential realignments, especially when it comes to the AAC, teams involved in it, teams potentially coming into it?
I think the biggest team regarding the AAC in particular is to watch is SMU. SMU has been trying to move up to the Power 5 for a while, and I think that they felt probably a little unjustly done by the Big 12 when they didn't get an invite, and that invite went to Houston and other teams. But, this is a team in SMU that have been building up for years now. They have a strong NIL base. They have a strong facilities now. They have a strong donor base, and so they are in an interesting position where if they want to move and if they can move up to the ACC, which seems to be the next likely option for them and the 4 Pac-12s, or at least 2 of the 4 Pac-12 schools, they are in an interesting position where they can take no revenue money for the first 7 years of the contract. And so what that does is it saves money for the rest of the teams. It offers more money to the rest of the teams because they can spread that revenue money that SMU would have taken and spread it across the other teams. So it is certainly an ideal option for the ACC if they want to expand, and the ACC does seem willing to expand. The thing to note is that regardless of what happens, if the American wants to add teams to the league, there's a clause in their contract with ESPN. There's a clause in their media rights with ESPN that they can go back and they can renegotiate the deal. So if they add the 4 Pac-12 teams, which are Stanford, Cal, Washington State, and Oregon State, they add those 4 teams and move them into the ACC, the AAC, the American. Mike Oresco then can go to the table with ESPN and renegotiate a new deal immediately. There's no need to wait. So whatever happens with the American, they're still in a position where they can renegotiate a deal if they can add schools. And so if you lose SMU, but you go in and you add two or three more schools, whether it be from the Mountain West or you add those two other Pac-12 schools that don't go to the ACC, you can go and renegotiate the contract. So there's a lot of moving parts. And so the thing that I tell everyone with conference realignment moves is don't believe everything you read because most people don't know what's happening. But there are a lot of avenues where this can go. And I don't think this gets decided soon. I think this is something that will take time. But there are so many avenues at this point that can happen. So it is still sort of, I think, a moving process. And from my understanding, it seems like the ACC is the ideal case for SMU and at least two of the Pac-4 teams remaining. But it can all change in a matter of minutes, hours, and we've seen that enough at this point. That don't believe everything you read because there's so much. Now, I don't want to say misinformation, but bad sourcing out there. There's so much bad sourcing, but the American is going to be fine in a very micro sense. The American will be fine even if they lose SMU. But I will be interested to see if they do look to add some of those Pac-12 schools that are remaining, even if it causes a bit of a travel issue. In the case for FAU particular, FAU is the southernmost team in the American, let's be clear, and they would have to travel potentially all the way up to Oregon State. And so there are some travel concerns there, but you can make it all work.
Yeah, you certainly can, and I don't know if the players themselves are being taken into consideration in this as much as they should, because that is a lot to ask players to be, going from Boca Raton, Florida, to going to Oregon State, to potentially going to Washington State on the West Coast. We see it with football how grueling of a schedule that is when you have these quick turnarounds, and then with school added onto it, having to get your academics right, have so many other obligations in your life. Like Zach, let's just say if these teams get added in, what do you think, weighing up the pros and cons? Pros of getting some bigger name schools to join the conference, cons of how it affects the team, how it affects the players. What is your stance on if some of these teams do get added into the AAC from the West Coast?
Listen, I hate to come out with the cop-out answer. I'm a little indifferent about it, but like you mentioned, there's pros and there's cons to it. We mentioned the travel situation. We mentioned how some of the big teams entering in the American can bring in more eyes to the product, which is always very good for FAU since they're a program on the rise here. But it just keeps reminding me how we're entering in, or we've already entered, just a new era of college football, whether it be conference realignment, whether it be the NIL really, just going around to every university, the transfer portal. Again, it's really interesting that our generation, the generation that's starting to get into college football, it is not the same, just sort of landscape that it was like a decade ago. Which I think is cool in its own right, but also there's some problems that we've seen coaches talk about, which, maybe I don't agree with everything that coaches say, but I do think that, the potential of guys from Boca Raton going to Oregon or Washington State is grueling, and especially if there's a travel schedule where you're going on the road a lot, you got to go back and forth or just go from one state to the other. It sounds like a mess. So I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. And again, all the things that Kevin was saying in terms of how the cost is going to be and which teams are going to enter and where. It seems like just people are just so confused. And I think it's really important what Kevin said. Like, there's a lot of just information that just don't believe everything you hear. Just wait and see. It's not really going to affect FAU at the current time. They're still facing Monmouth September 2nd. They're still going to be competing for an AAC championship. We'll see. So we just got to, I think fans should just focus on that, and rather if they're going to play Oregon State or Washington State. So, but again, the era that we're in is very interesting.
I will say, I think the concern is less with football players in particular with the travel schedule, because football, you only travel once a week. And right. So, the travel schedule doesn't really change for them, and you have chartered flights, and there's a little bit more money in football. My concern is with the softball team or with the baseball team, or with the women's soccer team, and them having to travel from Boca, from PBI or Fort Lauderdale, all the way up to Oregon State. And I'm not sure the airport structure in Oregon State or Corvallis where they play, and I'm not sure of if there's an airport there. But my understanding is there's not a direct flight from there to Oregon, and so now you're thinking, for a team that does not get chartered flights often, and instead they have to fly coach and they have to fly commercial. what does that look like? And if you have to travel to Oregon, Oregon State and Washington State. And so I think the best setup, if that's the case, is you play Oregon State and Washington State the same week. And so you spend a week up there and you get to play both them because the travel distance from Oregon State to Washington State is not as much, but it doesn't make sense from a travel logistics standpoint. But money's going to talk in the end. Money always talks in college football and college sports, and if the money is there for FAU and other schools in the American, they're going to vote to include new teams if that becomes a possibility, because that's the biggest thing is, if we can vote to include new teams and make more money off of it, we're going to do that every day of the week.
Yeah, it is a business at the end of the day. The money talks. Players will be there for 4, sometimes even 5 years, but the money stays. The money is going to continue to be a massive thing to do when it comes to college sports. And some things we talked about just now, by the time this video is uploaded, could be completely null and void, and something else could completely happen. But when it comes to this talk, it is just such what-if scenarios that are going beyond. So very interesting thing to look at. But like Zach said, either way, no matter what happens, week 1, about a week from today, FAU taking on Monmouth. That is the most important thing, is that we finally have football over the horizon. We will be there at the state. I'll be there, I know, at the very least. Are you two gentlemen planning on being there?
Don't know yet. Probably not, but we'll see.
How about you, Zach?
We'll be there probably for covering for the post, so just check out stuff in there. But listen, it's an exciting season. You know what I'm saying? And the one thing I will say about the conference stuff, if that ends up happening, I pray for the SIDs. I pray for the planners of these schools, because it's
they have a lot on their plate.
It's going to be a rough schedule. But
listen, it is very easy for us to talk about it from the comfort of our own homes, because we don't have to deal with the logistics of it.
Yeah.
But Brian White and everyone in the athletic department, they have to deal with the logistics of booking flights to Oregon and Washington. So I guess the biggest cop-out answer is just leave it to the professionals. They'll have the university's best interest at heart. But there are still logistics, from my understanding, that would have to happen. But I don't get paid to deal with those logistics, so I'm not going to deal with those logistics.
As I like to say, sounds like a whole lot of not my problem. That is people that get paid a lot more money and have esteemed positions that will be tasked to do this if it does come to it. And as a fan perspective, it will be fun if FAU is going over to the West Coast, and let's just say they play Stanford. Stanford probably joined one of the Power 5, but let's just say Stanford joins the AAC. That'll be a fun matchup seeing every year, every other year type thing. So as a consumer, that'll be cool, but definitely think about the players involved, the athletic directors, the SIDs, like Zach mentioned, all the other people logistically involved that actually have to carry the process out for us as fans to enjoy it. It will be a bit of a tough ask. But I think that's where we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you all very much for watching today. Again, very much appreciative. Coach Roc joining us to talk about the defense and all that's gone on during the fall camp. Jacob Kelly, Zach Weinberger, Kevin Fielder, we really appreciate y'all watching Inside the Burrow. If you haven't done so already, make sure to subscribe. Get down there in the comments, let us know what you think. Hit the like button. Thank y'all very much for watching today. Have a great rest of your day. Take care, everybody.